What's the worst date you've ever been on? Wasn't necessarily the date, which was bad on its own, but the fact that she hung out in my parking lot for 2 hours after she dropped me off in case I changed my mind about doing something after dinner. Back in college I was invited to an ice rink with a girl I liked and some of her friends. I did not know how to ice skate and I did not pick it up very quickly, but I wanted to try and impress her somehow. Well, I hugged the wall the whole time and made a fool of myself. The highlight was when I saw a flash of light as I fell in front of a group of people. Turns out I had fallen right at the moment someone took a picture, so my failure was immortalized forever. She took me back to my apartment and ended the relationship before it began. On a lighter note, the woman who is now my wife was at that ice rink on that night. We didn't realize we were there the same time until a year or two into our relationship and she exclaimed, "You were that guy who couldn't ice skate." Yeah. She didn't seem that into you. I like how that ended. Went on a blind date with a lady who wouldn't stop picking at her scabs. Just made a pile out of them on the restaurant table. I excused myself to use the washroom and when I came back my soup was there but the pile of scabs wasn't. No, I didn't eat the soup. Guy told me he just recently got out of a long-term relationship, so he wasn't looking for a commitment but asked me if he could be my maintenance man as he stroked his penis through his jeans. You met one of the Omegle guys in real life. Made plans with this guy I knew from a charity I was on the board with. He takes me a chain Mexican restaurant. I pull up a few minutes early. But my dad flies a plane and was going to be flying overhead of the restaurant and I wanted to see him fly over. At 8:00 sharp, the guy calls me and tells me that I am late. I try to explain the whole flyby thing. He isn't having it. We go inside and I try to order some food and he tells me that we are not getting food and that I can't eat. Then he starts going off on major political rants which I'm completely opposed to. I ask him if this is all a joke or if he really is being serious. I finally convince him to at least get an appetizer. I was not allowed to choose. He got guacamole, tableside, but only had them put onions in the avocado. I was planning my escape when he asked, "Are you figuring out how you are going to leave?" "Yep. Thanks for the one domestic beer. Bye." I went out with a guy that my roommate set me up with a few years ago. First, he was vocally irritated that I wore heels. BC had made him less taller than me. Note, he was still taller than me by a few inches, but just less taller. Dinner went alright, although we didn't have a whole lot in common. After dinner, we met back up with my roommate and her boyfriend and we all went to a house party of their friends. I basically knew no one at the party. My date's somewhat newly ex-girlfriend was there. To summarize, she called me a WHRE, spilled my drink on me, threatened to fight me, told me she gave him herpes, left, came back an hour later looking for me, hugged me, grabbed my ass, and apologized and told me I was hot. So I guess it went pretty well by the end of the night. We spent most of the date going shopping for clothes for another date she had later that week. It's kinda funny seeing as how she was the one that asked me out. I went on a Tinder date with a guy who is now in my contacts as Donovan Swip in his pic. Prior to the date he seemed normal. We texted and talked on the phone, then arranged to meet at a restaurant bar. He was cute but definitely bitter about something. He was from California and apparently didn't like this new city we were in. He started talking about sex and blowjobs and complaining about how uptight everyone here is about sex. He invited the waitress to a party his company was throwing. After sending back the French fries he ordered, I showed him a picture of my dog on my phone. He took out his phone and showed me a picture of his penis. We walked out of the restaurant together to get our cars from the valet. My car came first and I left. He texted me later that he had my sweater. Apparently I dropped it on the way out, and if I wanted to see it again I'd have to hang out with him. RIP. Sweater. Once in the throes of desperation I decided to try and meet someone on Craigslist. I found a posting that seemed like a nice, not insane, Fairly reasonable person that seemed to have common interests, and we got along pretty well during our email exchange. We met up at a local outdoor mall to walk around and chat for a bit and decide where to go from there. She was far bigger than I had been led to believe. Had definite facial hair. And smelled terrible. Like a trooper. I decided to stick it out. Because maybe she's really nice in person. I figured worst case scenario. Contact with someone who wasn't a co-worker or my family would be nice. Over the course of the date, she made multiple references to how nice it was to see so many other couples out and about that day. And attempted to name our future children and discuss weddings. There were some other red flag conversations that I don't recall. But it was odd. There was not a second date. I went out for dinner and a movie with a guy. I tried to chip in money at both. But he insisted that he cover it all. At the end of the night, we're sitting in his car in the parking lot of the restaurant we had just eaten at. And he asks for a BJ, saying, I bought you dinner and took you to a movie. It's the least you can do. Thankfully I lived nearby. I hopped out and walked home. Second date. You pay and demand he paints your kitchen. I was a barista in a cafe during college and this loyal customer asked me out. Took me to sushi. Took me to a bar and bought me a drink. Conversation good. Nothing spectacular, but he was cute and intelligent and funny. When he takes me home he parks outside of my house and assumes he's coming in. I'm like, no. Genuinely confused. He asks why not. He says he did everything right. He bought me dinner and a drink. So he should get to come inside. And we should have sex now. Because that's how it goes. And then we start arguing about it and I start to worry that he's going to just enter my apartment whether I like it or not. I am having to literally explain that just because he bought me dinner does not mean I have to FCK him. Then he puts on a Prince CD to try and get me in the mood. He actually said, here. Just listen to this. Prince's SY. All girls like Prince. I think I may have run when I finally got out of his car. Girl never showed up. I was stood up. I just moved to the bar and drank and ate buffalo wings. That sounds way better than a date. The girl who brought her sister along to chaperone. Awesome. I had met this really attractive Russian girl on Match.com and after talking for a few days we decided to get dinner. It was just awkward and she kept on making it purposely more awkward by ignoring me. Rolling her eyes and constantly staring around at things. She got really annoyed our food wasn't coming after about 5 minutes. It was just so bizarre because on the phone we had gotten along pretty great but she just refused to make small talk during the date. Who does that? When the waitress came and asked about the check I blurted out separate. Met at work over the summer a few years back. Figured a movie made the most sense so there wasn't time for awkward conversation lols. Lo and behold. Picked girl with the dragon tattoo because I never read it. That was awkward. Nothing breaks the ice like some good LRP scenes. Met a girl in a bar. Bought her a drink. Agreed to meet again. Went to her house to pick her up. Her dad comes to the door angry and screams. The FCK do you want with my 17-year-old daughter? I tried to explain how I met her and he screamed her name and slammed the door. I quickly left and renamed her number as do not answer. About 10 minutes from picking a girl up she asked me to pull to the side of the road to take a shitty and then proceeds to shitty in front of my car. Edit. This is now my most upvoted comment so thank you for making me laugh about it again. First date. The girl started lighting matches. Would put them out with her fingers. Then eat the burnt matchstick head. TL. Got stood up at a cafe. She called and told me an emergency had come up and she wasn't going to make it. I had only been waiting for 3 or 4 minutes. And wasn't too upset about it. So I called a friend to see what he was doing. Ended up meeting him across town at the bar he was drinking at. Where he introduced me to my date he had just met playing pool there. A guy in college took me out. Not to a Chinese restaurant. but to the parking lot of a Chinese restaurant to look at a tacky plastic Buddha statue. We had to walk through several blocks of sketchy area in the dark to get there. And he kept rubbing my back the entire way there and back even after I asked him to stop. I've only had one bad one. And it was this girl who wouldn't shut up about her ex. It was, predictably, our only date. I went to the movie Schindler's List on a first and last date when I was like 16 years old. Is it bad that I came on here looking for a date I was in? The 10th of July, 2013. I dropped my keys in the toilet that day and was late for work. So a few weeks ago, I went over to a girl's house to take her on a date. Turns out, she was dead asleep in her room. Her parents didn't know I was coming over. And it was pouring down raining. After standing in the rain for 5 minutes, her mom and dad finally let me in. A few minutes of awkward small talk ensued, followed by her dad inviting me to leave. Best date ever. This story actually won me a worst date ever contest a while back. We were supposed to go downtown and stroll around, talk, get to know one another. Instead, he drives the complete opposite direction for over 40 minutes until we get to this random river in the middle of nowhere. His excuse being he doesn't like crowds and wanted somewhere more private. I kept asking him to take me back, but he wouldn't listen. Did I mention it's storming? So I'm out in the middle of nowhere, in a thunderstorm, with a dude I just met that keeps singing Arabic love songs to me and telling me he loves me and wants to marry me. I'm not the praying type, but FCK if I wasn't begging any god that might be out there to not let this be the way I die. Went out on a lunch tennis date with a guy. Lunch was fine. He was alright. So we went to play tennis. After 9 games in 80-degree weather, we're all sweaty, stinky, and gross. And he immediately comes over after the last game, hugs me, then kisses me and sticks his tongue down my throat. I had to push him away, totally grossed out by both the sweat and the tongue, and had to awkwardly tell him to his face I wasn't into him because I didn't want him to kiss me again. Gentlemen, play it safe and don't stick your tongue in your date's mouth on the first date. This can be a major turn off. I have no idea why all the men I've dated recently think tongue kisses on the first kiss are a good idea. You know. Stop. Or at least ask. No matter when you kiss, you never go for tongue right away. You start slow and work up to it teasingly. That way you never have to ask. You just go with what she does. Keeps her mouth closed? No go. Keep normal kissing. Opens? All clear. With my ex a couple of years ago, she had had a very busy semester, so we almost never went out. And most of the free time she had, she wanted to spend with some friends from her classes. So after a while, we both decided to separate the next Saturday for a date night. We were gonna try this new Thai place. Saturday morning we were talking on the phone, and she says, so I'm gonna eat some Thai food tonight with my friends. You can come with us if you want to? That sentence made me so angry. I couldn't even think straight. I told her I would go, because she said she was going to pay. And I'm petty at FCK and wanted her to spend that money. We broke up soon after that. Halfway into our date he breaks down and cries about how he still loved his ex and how he would do anything to get her back. One of my first dates from OkCupid. Met him for lunch during a weekday. His first comment to me was that I looked professional and not like the party girl he was expecting. Well, yes. Because I'm a working professional at noon on a Wednesday. Not a stripper. WTF. He spent the entire lunch bragging about how good he was at his job and how jacked he was from his workout regimens. Then he mentioned he lived with his brother. I told him that was nice and asked him if they were close. His answer. Yay. Well, I felt like I had to take him in. He was never quite the same after our mother was murdered. Oh cute. To cap off the experience, On the way out of the restaurant he honored me with this fantastic compliment. "I just wanted to let you know I had a great time with you. You are officially number 2 on my list of girls that I'm considering dating. Hopefully you can rise to number 1 by the next date. Dot." I took a girl bowling and she got a 3. Now, I understand not being any good. And it really doesn't matter, but come on. 3. That's just plain impressive. She had to be shooting for lowest score. I mean, my 9-year-old sister with cerebral palsy got a 107 last week. She can hardly lift the ball, much less swing roll it. We went to his house and he immediately turned on Adventure Time. When I tried to speak, he shushed me. Adventure Time is serious business. He took it out. In summary, long time ago, my girlfriend decided at the last minute she wanted to do dinner and a movie after weeks of her saying she didn't want to do anything for Valentine's Day. All restaurants were full busy, so we ended up at Burger King. The movie she was dying to go see? Schindler's List. Bad to worse. I refused to leave the movie. She sobbed through most of the first half and pleaded that we leave at the intermission. Nope. I paid for it and she wanted to see it so damned bad, we were staying. You wanted Holocaust. You'll get Holocaust. I think the worst date I've ever had ended with me having to change the tire on his car. In a dress. At night. Met a girl at a party. Almost by accident I wound up playing it super cool. We decided on a date then and there for next week. She thinks she has a date with this cool guy. She doesn't. Before the date, I get the great idea to send her a fax. This was the 90s. I'm old, to sort of help her get to know me. Very jokey, etc. Rather than coming off endearing. It just seemed to have washed all the coolness off of me. I guess the fax achieved its purpose. She went on the date. I wish she hadn't. She clearly no longer wanted to be there. It was kind of like going on a date with a hostage. One word answers. No laughter. Checking her watch. Telling me she was moving out of state soon. Etc. I got her back. Though. I knew we had zero chemistry. But at the end of the night, I went in for the kiss anyway. Tongue and all. She went with it. But I swear I could feel her counting the seconds. Lessons learned. Sometimes it's ruder to be polite than to be honest. And I'm too dorky for dating. Didn't have much of a chance because I was hungover badly from the night before. Then he took me to the university dining hall for dinner. That's not too bad. But he didn't even offer to pay and he had a universal dining card, so it would have cost him $0. Then we went to a show but got there 2 hours early, and so we were just sitting there watching the band set up. Not talking. He had a universal dining card, so it would have cost him $0. Yeah. She's nice and all. But is she swipe worthy? This started bad but ended alright. My date and I were strip searched at the Detroit-Windsor, Canada border, in separate rooms. Driving over to Canada is a normal thing to do for 21Y. Oh. Americans. On this particular trip, Canadian Customs found a seed on the floor of my back seat. And it escalated from there. They didn't find anything and let us go eventually. I thought she would never talk to me again and it was awkward at first. But after a few drinks we had a good laugh out of it. I was 14. He had a crush on me and sat behind me in social studies. But we didn't talk much. I agreed to go on a date with him because I was flattered he asked. He brought his sister and she stayed with us the whole date. He picked the movie. So I was forced to sit through Are We There Yet? Afterwards. He didn't talk. Just sort of stared at me. So f***ing awkward. And then he decided it would be a good idea to yell I love you out of the window as they drove away. Yikes. Double date at the movies. We sat in the back because it was a small theater and those were the best seat. Look over and the other couple was jacking off, fingering each other. I tried to ignore it. Then a rat ran down the aisle. He spent the entire time talking about himself. Whenever I tried to ask him for more detail, I would unwittingly trap him in a lie. After a while, I was finding it more embarrassing than he was. He couldn't even quite agree with himself on what town he lived in. When I got home, I got a text message off him saying, "Thanks for tonight. You aren't really my type. But if you want some quick no strings FCK fun, then you can suck me off. As long as it's no strings." And attached a photograph of his penis.